Hello and welcome to Agency Office Hours for January 2025. I'm Agency Advisor Karl Sakas at Sakas and Company, helping you work less and earn more as an agency owner while rewarding your best team members. Today is a special fireside chat episode of Agency Office Hours. We're speaking with Karl Smith of the Bureau of Digital about life after agency ownership. If you're joining us live, I have a number of questions for Karl, and if you have questions for him or for me, put them in chat, and Kate, our producer, will help us sort through the questions to relay them along. If you'd like to ask questions at a future office hours where you're the guest, where I'm answering your questions, include your question when you RSVP for the future event, and we'll let you know ahead of time if you are on the list for the Q&A. All right. Well, let's dig in. Our featured guest today is Karl Smith, the head of the Bureau of Digital, an amazing community for agency leaders that I've been involved in various ways for, at this point, over a decade. If you aren't a member of the Bureau, you should probably join, but I'm sure Karl can share more about that. Uh, I know that you might be thinking about selling your agency someday. Might be sooner, might be later. Certainly, the sooner you start, the more options you'll have, and I'll share a resource that you can use if that's on your radar. Well, you're in luck. We are talking today all about life after agency ownership. Karl Smith, welcome.
Thanks, Karl Sakas. It's good to see you.
Yeah, it's great to have you as a guest. If people aren't familiar with you and your work already, if you could, please introduce yourself.
Sure. My name is Karl Smith. Thought I was going to be an actor, but I wasn't that good, y'all. I could have made it on like Bad Dinner, Boat Theater, whatever. Uh, but I ended up in advertising, and it turned out I was pretty good at memorizing.
Oh,
So I was a decent writer, but I ended up more in the challenge became for my boss was that I sold mediocre writing and the client loved it.
uh-oh.
So she was like, "We want you to sell better work. So we're not going to let you do that anymore." So I spent 14 years at the agency gathering titles, media director, SVP of tech once the internet showed up, all this kind of nonsense. And then started my own shop, Engine Works, started that for about 14 years. Uh, started it for 14 years. It felt like that. And then found the Bureau while I was still at Engine and just fell in love with community and supporting each other and eventually sunset my agency. I tried to sell it, but I got hoodwinked a little bit, but it's my fault. And now I run the Bureau. And the Bureau is a collection of amazing creative leaders, founders, as well as employees. And we're just helping each other every day as we go through these challenges. And it's kind of a magical job. So it's frustrating sometimes, but most of the time I just see people helping each other and it's the best.
That's a great feeling. And, making life easier for others, bringing people together. I was going to ask, how did you get into agency life? You shared a bit about that. How did you get your very first job at an agency?
Yeah, so my mom got it for me.
All right.
I
You
mean, I'm
someone.
gonna tell the truth, y'all.
Yeah.
So no, I was in advertising at the University of Florida.
Mhm.
I didn't really think my professors knew much. They were teaching from their own textbooks. So I
Oh,
think if your professor is teaching from their own textbook, they can get caught up in themselves a little bit. My mom knew a couple of people in the agency world back in Jacksonville. And so I met Melanie Husk. I got an internship. And oh, Emily, come on. We're both not any good right now. Let's not do this. For those at home, Emily just said boo Gators. I'm a Seminole. Um,
I,
but
I will say I have a friend who's in Austin who's a University of Florida graduate, and her comment was about the difference between the sort of sports kind of arm movements, where I guess the Gators are like the two-handed like Gator versus
yeah,
the
yeah.
Tomahawk. Her comment was that I guess the to be fair, the Seminoles only need one arm because they may be intoxicated. Though, from what I
Uh,
can tell about University of Florida, I mean, it may be a little bit of both.
well, and the Gators have never been upset about us doing any kind of cultural appropriation. So I think we're even. I think we're good. Um,
So,
so
your mom got you the job.
so yeah, so I met Melanie Husk. Her and her husband had a shop called Husk Jennings, and I told her I didn't think my professors knew what they were doing
Ah,
at the internship interview, and I showed her the options I had, and I said, if you don't ask me, or offer me an internship, would you at least take a look and see what classes I should be taking?
hmm.
So we sat there and looked over, and she was like, "This is pathetic."
Oh.
It's like, yeah, they're teaching stuff from like 15 years ago, and she goes, "Okay, okay, we'll get you in. We'll show you what's going on." So yeah, that was how I ended up with an internship. They offered me a job before I left when
Mhm.
I graduated. My bosses were also FSU people, and I believe it was if you ever graduate from that half-ass university of yours, then you do have a job here. When I came back, they had had a layoff,
Oh.
and they couldn't hire me,
Hmm.
but they had a lot of empty desks. So I
Okay.
just sat down at one, and I was working on my resume, and somebody walked by and went, "Oh, I didn't know you were back. We're having a meeting. We need a writer. Do you want to come in?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'll do it." So for about 4 weeks, I went in every day. And then I got asked to come in and work on the weekend. And I said, I don't work here. And they offered me 16,700 by the end of the day. I'll never forget. It felt like so much money. And I'll never forget Melanie saying, I didn't realize we didn't hire you back. I had no idea you just showed up and sat down. I was like, it worked. So,
There we go. Well, showing up, making things happen. So you were there for, you said, for about 14 years. How did
hmm.
starting your own agency come about?
Well, the around the 12th year that I was at Husk, the internet happened.
Okay.
Now, before that, we were building things with Macromedia Director. We were doing CD-ROM stuff, all that kind of stuff. And the internet just happened, and we started playing around with it. Uh, I ended up becoming director of interactive or something.
Mhm.
And I remember we just started playing around with it. But what happened was it wasn't really being adopted the way I thought it should be. And we were definitely doing online brochures, all that kind of stuff.
Okay.
And I started talking with the team that we were building, and it just got to this point where I was so frustrated because, and this is the way advertising agencies are. They take care of the relationship over the quality of the work,
Hmm.
and that doesn't fly well when you're trying to do feathered edges on a website and all this nonsense. So I ended up leaving. It was really weird. I got offered to become president, and I just realized I didn't want to be there anymore.
Okay.
Um, and so I ended up starting my own shop, and brought over three people I knew really well.
Mhm.
Um, and we were all equal in terms of time and money, which was a huge mistake.
Yeah, I
Um,
wouldn't recommend if we had talked Time Machine back then, I would not have recommended that.
yeah, but at the time, I was coming out of a place where it felt like the most valuable people were paid the least,
Hmm.
and the people who managed the relationship, I would say the chefs weren't getting paid, but the servers were making a lot of money. And
Okay.
I was a server. But I just, when I started my shop, I was like, this doesn't feel right. So I tried to create a utopia. It doesn't exist. So
I mean, it's one of those good in theory, good on paper, but kind of struggles in
yeah,
reality.
we're
So
all so different.
yeah. So what did you like and not like about running the agency?
I think what I love the most was winning new
Okay.
projects. I love getting in there. I love the strategy of knowing who you were going against and
Hmm.
positioning yourself against them. So, for example, if I knew somebody was going to present three options for design or something, I would go in and say, if they don't know you by then, if they can't cull it down to one great option, then why would you work with them? But if I knew they were going to go in with one direction, hey, one direction, I would go in and say, how can they possibly know right away? You've got to have multiple options. You're the one who has to make the decision. We're just trying to guide you to that point. It's cocky and irresponsible to come in here with one design. So I would literally play that game.
I mean,
Um,
both of those are accurate in their own ways. And it also importantly makes the client choose not which agency do they like best, but they're choosing a philosophy or an approach they like best rather than,
yeah,
which free work is the best.
yeah. But I love that. I loved once we found South by Southwest and other conferences, going out to all these events, getting up on stages, all that stuff was amazing. The thing I didn't like was the business side. I hated the back office stuff. I hated pushing clients when they weren't paying on time. We fired clients really quickly.
Hmm.
Ended up with a reputation for it. But yeah, I would say that was the stuff I didn't like. I love the work, I love the team, and I loved being on stage. All that stuff was so much fun.
Yeah. So you mentioned getting involved in the Bureau of Digital, which you now own, getting involved when you were running EngineWorks.
Yeah.
How did you find out about it, or how did that come about?
Yeah. So I was promoting our model of work, which was called the jellyfish model.
Okay.
So basically, clients pitched us, and we decided if we thought we were a good fit for the project or not. And it didn't work with everybody. Microsoft wasn't going to play the game. Facebook, we were one of the first seven, I think, that were allowed to work with Facebook. They thought it was amazing. Startups loved it. They had to pitch us, all this stuff. Um, so that I was speaking about it. We were getting written up in magazines, all this stuff. And the guys at Happy Cog noticed. So we always had like a friendly little battle that they always won. That's why it was friendly, I guess.
Okay.
But but
Friendly for
they
them, at least.
yeah, right. I mean, we won one project from them because they had to withdraw from a conflict, and I called them and said, "We're counting it. We're counting it. This is a win."
Okay.
Uh, but then they reached out and said that they were inviting, I think it was 20 owners, 24 owners total, to come to Portland, Oregon, and spend 4 days just talking about what was working and what wasn't. And I asked them why.
Right. That was the
It was
original.
called Shop Talk, yeah. And I'm good friends with Chris Coyer, so I told him, I was like, hey, you might want to change that. He's got like a really popular podcast called that. But I replied to him and I was just like, I appreciate you doing that. I'm not sure why you want me to go. And they said, well, we think you're either really smart or totally full of shit. And I said, well, I
Okay.
would I would like to know which it is because I'm not really sure. And so I went. And it was amazing. Could be both, Steve. Absolutely. But I went and there were some friends there, Kelly Goto. Um, there were Aaron Mintley, like some really great people. And but the imposter syndrome,
Hmm.
the roof. I mean, Christina Halverson, who coined the term content strategy, was there, right? And you had Erica and Mike Montero from Mule. You had Gabe Levine there, like all these people. Well, a lot of them are my good friends now. But at the time, I was just sitting there, like holding my breath, hoping to make it through without looking stupid.
I mean, like the supposed Abraham Lincoln quote of better to be thought a fool than open your mouth and remove all doubt.
Exactly.
So you went to that first event, then what?
Yeah. So, at the first day, what was amazing was people I thought were absolutely brilliant
Mhm.
were holding on by a thread. People I thought were a little bit off were crushing it. And it turned out I was kind of in the middle. Like there
Okay.
were some things I was doing really and just badly. I wasn't doing a good job. Then there were other things that everybody would perk up and take notes. And I was like, oh, I do know stuff. I
Yeah.
have I would say the pause clause was one of them.
Okay.
Like I mentioned the pause clause, Gabe kind of looked at me and he's a lawyer. And so he starts writing it down and he came over to talk to me afterwards and asked if he could actually see it.
Interesting. And for
So
people who aren't familiar, what is the pause clause and
yeah,
why?
the pause clause basically was a clause we put in contracts that said if a client deliverable was late by a certain number of days, that the project was automatically on hold. and that when it came off hold, we had the rights to renegotiate both the budget and the timeline. And so clients really didn't want to go on hold, especially with our reputation for firing clients,
Yeah.
um, which eventually bit us in the butt. But um, yeah, so, and then the next day, it felt like we were becoming friends. And by the time we left, everybody's hugging, everybody knew everybody's inner secrets. We spent so much time comparing our insides to other people's outsides and social media and all this. And at that table, after the first day, everybody just put their guard down because
Yeah.
they realized this was an opportunity to really, really get to understand other people and yourself.
And you still do that today in the Bureau. So
Yeah,
let's
I'm
back
addicted to
forward
it.
a little bit. You initially participated in Bureau events as an attendee, as a participant.
Yeah.
Uh, how did you think of buying the Bureau before you wanted to wind things up at the agency, or like sort of how did that come about?
Yeah. So I was speaking at their bigger events like DPM Summit, which is where I think you and I first met.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, like 20,
APM Summit in Austin.
yeah.
Yeah, that was a big one too. And so I was just attending all of their events. We had gotten to a point at my company, EngineWorks, where the team was running everything. The jellyfish model was working.
Mhm.
And I took a 9 month hiatus. And
Okay.
I would show up an hour a day just to make sure everybody was okay.
Hmm.
It's not like I was just raking in the cash. We were all still fairly, we had open books, so everybody knew what I was making, which kept me in check a little bit.
Okay.
Um, but then I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do.
Hmm.
I started this thing called the Helping Project, where anybody could reach out to me and I would try to help.
Like anyone, not just at the agency, like anyone in the world, or anyone in Jacksonville, or
Anyone. I was on stages telling people if they needed help and thought I could help to reach out to me. And man, that was an ultimate horrible shit show.
okay.
Um, well, because people were contacting me about things going on at work that were like, you should call the cops. You
Mm.
should not email me.
Wow.
They're proper authorities for this, and I am not that authority. So I was a little deflated, and I didn't know what to do. And my youngest daughter came out; she was around 12, and she asked me how I wanted to be remembered. And I was like, "What do you mean?" She goes, "When you're not here anymore, when you're dead, how do you want to be remembered?" And she's always been an old soul.
Okay.
And so I just looked at her and I said, "I mean, I want to be known as somebody who was successful but didn't have to hurt anybody to do that."
Yeah.
There are a lot of people out there who advance themselves at the expense of others. And to me, that's the definition of evil. So I want to be successful and, bring people with me. And then because we had worked on projects together, she asked me how I was going to measure it. Right. She goes, what gets measured gets done. So there's this time in your life where your kids start repeating things back to you, make good choices. And I just looked at her and I was like, um, I'll measure it by how many people I help. I'll just keep a running tally.
Okay.
And then she asked that infamous question, how does that scale? And I was like, I don't know. And then she went back inside and I looked at my email and I had an email from the Gregs asking if I wanted to become a partner.
Wow.
And I was like, I don't have to help anyone myself. I want to and I will, but I just have to connect people that can help each other.
And
That's the key.
when you create that community, ultimately everyone is helping each other, and
Yeah.
you were you're the person who brought everyone together, but you didn't have to personally DM with every single member of the
Right.
Conference. That
Although I will say for the first couple hundred people, it felt like I knew everybody. Now that we're over 1,400 and like 23,000 alumni or something,
Mhm.
yeah, that's not real. I want to know everybody, but I do have to go back and check sometimes, you
you know,
know?
there's that idea of, you can the idea of communities of up to 150 people that, if a community or a company or a neighborhood is up to 150 people, you can still know people fairly well. But then after that, things tend to sort of break off into their own
Yeah.
units and things like that.
And
Um,
so that becomes the biggest job is to set the tone
yes.
before people get there. Let them know what this is about. And then you do kind of have to be that person that's going to tell some people, all right, you out of the pool. There are going to be a few people who are just bad actors.
Yeah.
And luckily, we haven't had that. I shouldn't say that. We haven't had it in probably about 4 or 5 months. And normally, I kind of take that Disney approach
Okay.
of uh, of like, hey, Mickey Mouse is out, and then you go over to the bad guest, and you're like, could you come with us, please? So,
As
but
as,
yeah,
as
that's been it.
Goofy drags them into the maintenance tunnel for
That's right.
chatting. Okay, so you received the email from the Gregs, who are the
Thanks.
founders of the
Who are
bureau.
the founders? Yeah.
And at that point, I mean, you had been to a bunch of events, kind of like your experience with your first agency, where you just showed up and got hired. So, okay, so it sounds like you still owned the agency at the time,
Yep.
and you got the offer. Like, how did that come about, or rather, how did that unfold?
Yeah. So I got the email from them, and they wanted to have a call. They wanted to talk about it.
Mhm.
And what had happened was, because I was on this 9 month hiatus, I started doing my own stuff. Like I did a lead sharing network where I was only inviting in the shops that I thought were good people and did good work. Uh, and they didn't like that. The Gregs had wanted to do their own lead sharing network.
Oh,
And so they started seeing these other things I was doing, and they were just like, do you want to do that over here?
well, and I mean, it's like you're allowed to do your own thing, and so
Yeah.
it sounds like they wanted that to be part of their organization.
Yeah. I think the way that it was initially said to me was, we don't want you doing that. And I was like, you know, it's nice to want things,
Yeah.
but I'm doing it. I'm not hurting you. I'm not taking away. And but you met everybody in our community. And I was like, that's not the way community works, I don't think. But then
Mm.
we just started talking, and then they were like, well, we wanted to offer you a, chance to become a partner. And I was like, lead with that. Lead with that because I was all in. And then it took a little while. That was about 2014. The bureau had been around for about 2 years. Called the bureau for probably about a year and a half, and it was a Bureau of Digital Affairs. First thing I changed was I dropped the affairs. I was like, we're traveling to tropical places and we're hanging out, and the word affairs in there, and that just does not feel good to me.
No.
Um, so yeah, but they offered, and then around 2016, I ended up taking over. One of the Greg Story, went off to IBM to help them in their summer of hiring 2,000 designers. And then Greg Hoy went back to HappyCog because he wanted to build it back up.
Got it.
And so I thought I was buying in to be a partner, and it turned out they both left.
Oh, so now at this point, you were the owner of two different businesses. Sounds
Yeah.
like the agency you delegated a lot, so it wasn't something you needed to do 80 hours a week, but now you were rather than a partner, you were the partner at this new business. So how did you decide what to do with the agency?
It was tough. I will say I had fallen out of love with Engine.
Okay.
And I think part of it was I always wanted to create self-sustaining entities. Like for some reason that was always in my brain. I don't want to have to be the person who's making decisions. I don't want to have to lead. I don't want to have to do this and do that. Um, and so Engine became that.
Uh,
And I didn't like it. I didn't like the decisions that were being made because it felt like this was a place I created. But I had to stay true to what I had said. And so even though they would bring me in and ask me questions when things got rough, eventually we got to this like really tumultuous point. I'm gonna have to look that word up.
that-
Um, but we got to this point where a little bit of legal issues with one of the clients. And that was when I realized I can play like I don't work here, but there's only one throat that's going to get choked, and that's mine. So I started thinking I probably need to sunset the agency.
okay.
Uh, we weren't going to get bought for any huge amount of money, although we were with 14 on the team. We were about a $2 million a year agency, $2.5 million a year agency. Um, but we got to this point, and I just couldn't figure out what it was I wanted to do. And then I got an offer to acquire it. Um, Now I think it
Just
was
out
pretty
of the blue,
obvious.
unsolicited.
Unsolicited, it was actually somebody who was sponsoring one of the Bureau events. And so they didn't actually show up after sponsoring, which should have been a red flag. Um, but they did pay for the sponsorship. And then they said that they had heard a couple of things that I'd mentioned that sounded like I wasn't really didn't have my heart in it, and they were looking to buy an agency.
Okay.
And but we'll keep this part of the story a little bit short. Let's just say that be careful
Yeah.
because there are people out there that will take advantage. Um, and I ended up in that camp because it was obvious. I'm where my emotions for everyone to see, and that ended up happening. So we went from being fairly healthy, like when we were going to do a voluntary layoff, so everybody knew um, what was coming. It was transparent. If
Okay.
you didn't have work by a certain date, you weren't going to get paid.
Yeah.
And we had a few $100,000 in the bank, but that was getting eaten up really quickly. Um, and then a lot of folks left, and it was good. They got great jobs.
Mhm.
But then this acquisition offer came in that pretty much tanked us. And by the time I pulled up and got rid of that person, um, it was going to be a lot to rebuild it. And I wasn't in love. I was in love with the Bureau. So I ended up deciding I was going to close it. And my youngest daughter, Alyssa, who's also the one that asked me how I wanted to be remembered, she
Yeah.
told me I couldn't. I was not allowed to close Engine Works because I
Okay.
told her I started it because I loved her and her sister and my wife. Because
Okay.
I started it to be home more while
Uh,
they were growing up
okay.
and to not be beholden to anybody. Boy, was I wrong. When you run your own thing, it's not like you suddenly have like whatever you want.
Right.
Um, and so she wouldn't let me. And then I called Gabe Levine, who was the
Uh-huh.
lawyer from the first Bureau event, and I
Like,
said,
you talk to my daughter and like persuade her about this.
no, I asked him, I said, can the Bureau acquire Engine Works for $1?
Ah.
Can I sell it to myself?
Mhm.
And he said, yeah, why? And I explained it to him. He goes, all right, we'll do it. I'm like, dude, she'll want to see the papers. Like she is not playing around.
Mhm.
So I did. And I asked her, I said, if Engine lives on within the Bureau, is that okay? And she was like, I'll allow it. So that was kind of what happened to Engine. It came on over to be a part of the Bureau, which from a credit perspective was
Mhm.
beautiful because we had great credit.
So it sounds like you did a stock. We talk about in the Control and Maximize Your Agency Exit workshop, stock sales versus asset sales. It sounds like you were able to pull all of the history in
Yeah.
for nice. Well,
Yeah.
let's take a moment for a word from our sponsor, Sakas and Company. Hi, Karl Sakas here, helping agency owners work less and earn more while creating opportunities for their team, their best team members in particular. So my workshop, Control and Maximize Your Agency Exit, is now available on demand as an on-demand training. It's about 6 hours of content in modules. You can do it at your own pace. If you've ever considered selling your agency, well, keep in mind your agency is likely your family's number one, maybe number two financial asset. So they're counting on you. I mean, as Carl said, like your family is invested in your business. So how soon in advance should you prepare to sell? Probably sooner than you think. Things take a while. The first person who reaches out to acquire may not be a match, may need to go through a few. Also, keep in mind that acquirers are looking usually at the value of your agency based on your profits over the past 3 years, which means if you were to sell now, they're looking back at past profits. Whereas if you wait a few years, now you've got time to grow your net margins, your EBITDA, and try to improve the numbers to get a better deal. So the sooner you start, the sooner you prepare, the better, even if it's a long time out. Even if you conclude you don't want to sell at this point, that's still helpful as you can focus elsewhere. So the training, the Control and Maximize Your Agency Exit training, isn't just me. It's actually 9 speakers turned into almost a mini conference. There's a panel of agency sellers and buyers sharing what they wish they had known. Andrew Wilkinson's former head of agency acquisitions shares what he looked for when he bought firms for Tiny, the agency holding company. The former head of M&A at Interpublic Group shared what he did and what he looked for as he was buying agencies anywhere valued from $2 million to $2 billion. I will caution you, very few agencies sell for $2 billion, but it is possible. And Jonathan Baker at Punctuation shares about valuation trends. Don't leave your agency's financial future to chance. You can get instant access to the training, control and maximize your agency exit right now, and complete it at your own pace. Click the link in chat or in the video description to get your instant access. And now back to our conversation with agency community leader and former agency owner, Karl Smith. Karl, hello again.
Hello again. I like that you mentioned some of my friends there, Andrew
Yeah,
Wilkinson, and yeah.
yeah. The agency world is smaller than you'd think. There are maybe 40,000 agencies in the US, more beyond. And yes, in fact, joining us live is one of our panelists from the program. So thanks for joining. So Karl, thinking about what's going on, let's shift here.
Mhm.
As you run the bureau, you're hearing from over 1,000 people on what's going on in their agency and seeing the industry in general. I see it too in my work with hundreds of agencies all over the world. What trends are you seeing right now that people listening, whether live or in the recording, should be thinking about?
I mean, a lot of it's going to be the obvious, right? I mean, figuring out how AI can play a role, um, understanding that it's not the be all end all right now, and you just have to figure out how to integrate it best. We are definitely heading into a very large M&A cycle. Uh, for better or for worse, money is going to get cheaper. At least that's the way everybody's feeling about it. At which point, there are going to be people coming off the sidelines for startup investment and for acquisition. So that is definitely a huge trend that I see coming. And then you have a lot of people who are trying to niche down even more,
Mhm.
um, to get more specialized so that people really want to work with them. Now,
Mhm.
now the dirty little secret is they're really niche down in marketing, but they'll kind of take whatever you got, right? Because they need to feed the cash flow beast. So, but yeah, I think that's a lot of what people are really looking at coming in this year. And people are optimistic. A lot of people had good fourth quarters, a few people didn't. But the way it looks on the everything going in-house, every coming back to agencies, it
Yep.
feels like we're coming back to the agencies, the beginning of that cycle, which I feel these cycles last like 3 to 5 years. And it feels like it's coming back. And I think it's because a lot of big companies aren't necessarily wanting to hold the staff.
Yes.
So
I mean, I see that. I have a close friend who's at a large legacy tech company, and they had layoffs last year. There are probably more coming, but the company still needs to operate. They still need to get things done. Even as large corporations shrink their middle management layers, they're still needing to ship their products and services. And agencies can be a way to do that without a manager or a director or a VP or a CMO having to justify to their financial team, we need to add permanent headcount. So that makes a lot of sense. Speaking of AI, I really enjoyed the Bureau's AI in Your Agency event, the inaugural one. I recommended that a number of my clients go to the second one, and the next one is coming up, and I'm happy to be helping promote it, the AI in Your Agency event that's coming up in San Francisco in August of 2025. Is there anything you can share about I know it's still in the planning phases,
yeah,
anything you could know if they're thinking of attending?
yeah, we're gonna have some of the smartest people that run an agency and are diving headfirst into AI. Will Reynolds is coming back.
Awesome.
Uh, I'm I don't want to misspeak, but I think some of the speakers from the first one are coming back. We've
Yeah.
also got some new people that we're bringing in. Um, we are bringing in Megan, who is in Portland running the AI stuff there, and they have grown a community into the hundreds around AI, the local event they're doing. And so she's going to come out and talk about that. Um, but the main thing is it's a chance to realize you haven't missed the boat
Yes.
because the boat keeps changing. There's a new one every day. So don't worry that you didn't jump on the one from 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago. There's like so much new stuff. I'll tell you, for us as a community, the big challenge we have is trying to figure out how do we use AI
Yep.
to unearth all this content. We have 1.4 million messages in Slack.
Wow.
I'm not going to read them all. So the opportunity, and this is coming up. We've got a new level of membership called Cruise Control. So it's going to be a $29 a month opportunity to see what these conversations are. And this is going to be, you won't see who said what, but just what are the conversations going on with operations folks, with founders and owners, with project managers, with design leaders, creative directors. Like, what are they all talking about? What's going on? So that's going to be like a weekly opportunity.
Mm.
Um, I know I kind of jumped over there with AI, but
Well,
for AI in your agency, I don't really know where we're going to go, but I know it's going to be great because these speakers are always just fabulous.
I mean, same here, right? The first one, I would say, a beginner with AI. I was using ChatGPT just off the shelf, but not much more than that. I knew there was more that was possible. Uh, I learned all kinds of new things, both specific tools and tips and tricks, and also an idea of what was possible.
Yeah.
That maybe there were some things that I learned then that I might have, I needed more technical skills. Now you can do just off the shelf in a no code form.
Yeah.
And so, now I'd say I'm more intermediate. I'm looking forward to learning the latest, what's new and all. And we've shared a link in chat to the event, and we also have it in the video description if you're watching later. So uh, I mean, also in terms of growth, you mentioned agencies being positioned for growth and niching to help. One of my client case studies is working with Chris Dreyer at rankings.io, where when we started together, we did coaching for about 4 years. He was at 2 million a year, and 4 years later, he was at 12 million a year. And continuing to grow, I think he's hit the Inc. 5000 list like 7 years in a row, which, that requires lots of sustained growth, not just a one-off. So, but of course, grow to the level that you want rather than what everyone tells you to do. So, what is your advice, Carl, for someone who is owning an agency now and they're considering switching from owning an agency to something else? And something else could be being an individual consultant or a fractional CMO or CTO or some sort of fractional role. Maybe it's running a different business. Maybe it's just taking some time off. Maybe they don't know what they want next. What would be your advice if they're considering leaving running their agency?
Yeah. So I have had the privilege of speaking with quite a few people who have both exited successfully
Mhm.
and had to do like I did and kind of just close it with a little whimper and a frown. Um, and what I'll say is it's going to hurt. It doesn't matter if you get a payday. You created something out of nothing, and it's part of your DNA. And you have people that have trusted you, and you're going to have to work in the shadows because you don't, if it doesn't work out and all these things. So there's a lot of it that I think just as a human, you need to prepare for. Now, if you need to do this because you're just burnt out
Yeah.
and you don't want to be associated anymore, or maybe you've got some sort of a life situation going on and you don't have the time and you need some money. Like, there are a lot of reasons. There are a lot of people I call never sells,
Hmm.
and they don't think it through. And some of these people do sell, right? But at that moment, they're like never going to sell. And I appreciate that.
If one challenge is if you've been never sell, you may not lay some of the groundwork you need so that if things change, they
Yeah.
talk about the three Ds, divorce, debt, and death. I got an inquiry a year and a half ago from a financial advisor, financial planner, where a family friend of his had owned an agency and had died unexpectedly, and he was trying to help the founder's family figure out what to do. And they ultimately were able to, I made some intros M&A wise, and they were able to sell the agency, but they hadn't had a plan. They were lucky that someone was willing to step in and help.
Yeah,
Um, so it's tough.
it's tough. And I always tell the never sells, you should still run it like you're going to.
Yes.
You should still make sure that you have got all of your books in order, that you are running at whatever is considered the optimal place. And everybody always says, oh, you need, 9 months worth of cash and all this kind of stuff. That's hard, right? So a lot of us give up right out of the gate because we're like, well, I can't do that. So none of this matters. You can, it just might take a while. You're going to
Mm.
hit some of those good times. And I think that becomes one of the biggest challenges for somebody who does sell or doesn't sell. But the other thing I'll say is don't go into something right away. Don't fill that void. Like once you sell, give yourself some time to process because you are, I mean, honestly, you're gonna go through a time period of mourning.
Yeah.
You created something and it's gone or it's going to somebody else. And do not watch whatever they do with it. Do not watch. Like do your best to avoid it. You may try to sell it to your employees. That's really difficult. It's a wonderful gesture, but it's really difficult unless you have a tremendous amount of money. ESOPs are hard to have come through. And then when it comes to what you're going to do next, go ahead, Carl.
And you could also sell them more directly, like they get an SBA 7A loan for up to
Yeah,
$5 million or other things. But that also requires, in that case, that they have a good credit score. I had a client who is thinking of selling to a key employee, and I'm like, what is his credit score? The owner's like, I don't know, why? And I'm like, he needs to be able to get a loan. It turns
the
out his
thing.
is very good, but I'm like, just don't buy make sure he doesn't go off and buy a boat, you know?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And realize that the line of credit is now tied to your mortgage. So get ready for that. It's not as much fun as you might think on this side of the table. But then I would also say when you do decide what you're going to do next, the grass is always greener where you water it. I mean, you have to focus on what you want to do. I wave people away from being coaches and consultants right now because I think the market is so full. Now there are some great ones. Carl, you're one of them, right? I think David Baker does a great job. I,
Yeah.
I think there are a lot of people out there who really are great at what they do. There are other people who are just bored and they needed something, right? I get asked to coach all the time, and I say no because I'm horrible at it,
Coach
right?
the job. I mean, like thinking of the sports analogy, like someone wouldn't just show up and become the coach for a professional sports team.
No, and coaches are important, right? I mean, it's like you look at it, Michael Jordan without Phil Jackson, you know, or Shaq without Riley. I mean, like these people play a role, and
Yeah.
it's important because nobody is good enough to do everything by themselves. So I don't belittle that at all. I just think there's so many right now that I think a better plan is, uh, I guess, to really just find a spot that nobody's filling,
Mm.
right? Maybe it's, I mean, it could be as niche down as like Blair ends with pricing.
Mhm.
I don't see, besides Dan Moore was in the pricing thing for a little while, but I don't see a lot of people focused on pricing. I don't see a lot of people that are necessarily focused on culture,
Mm.
right? Or some of the human side. And I am the human side of leadership is like where I live. It helps me sleep at night. But I would say there are a lot of fractional COOs. They're now fractional CMOs. You know, um, I can't remember. I saw one the other day, but I've talked about the authenticity coach. Like I got approached by an authenticity coach to help me be more me. I'm like, I
I
don't
don't
even,
know
I
if you
don't
need help
understand
with
this.
that.
Yeah, but I would say don't just dive into whatever your main skill was. Look
Yeah.
for a subset of that skill so that you can stand out and you can offer somebody something deeper.
Mm.
If you're going to go into that, um, everybody has an online course. Everybody has all these things. So just realize you may be stepping into a very, very just bogged down environment that you're trying to succeed in. Now, that said, if you have friends that are running shops and you want to get started that way, uh, I know Rob Haar with Upwell. He basically just started doing operations consulting for shops in the bureau, and now he's landed some really massive agencies that are not in the community. So I think that's the other thing. You got to get some traction, and if you just roll the dice and say, "Hey, what would you like for me to teach everybody about?"
Yeah,
I
yeah.
almost went into my goofy there. Hey, buddy. Um,
Back
so
to
yeah,
the
I would
again.
say just take the time and really look and see what nobody's doing that you think you're great at,
Mm.
and toss that out there. Or open a bakery. Everybody loves croissants.
That's an option, and it can turn into a Hallmark movie. We have a question from Emily in chat. What about consulting outside of working directly with agencies?
Ooh, I like that a lot. I think consulting on the client side
Mhm.
is brilliant. Helping them understand. I actually kind of I ended up getting thrown a different job when I went to work for Hilton Hotels for 4 months. Never do that. Never work for a big corporation if you've run your own thing because you will just get crushed. Um, but what I they put me in charge of their advertising agency.
Ah,
And as a result, I knew what they were going through. And so I would be on a call with the agency. I was like, look, it feels like y'all are bogged down with somebody else's deadline. And if that's what it is, just let me know. Right. But if you're going in to coach a client, I think that just being telling them these are the things to look out for. This is when they really want to help, but maybe you haven't given them what they need.
mm,
Um, there's so much that we've learned from this side that Emily, I think that's a brilliant way to go. I have a friend who did that. Um, at his agency, he had created an innovation lab for one of their clients.
mhm.
And then he closed the agency and just went around to corporations opening up these innovation labs. He did one for American Express like 2 years ago.
Wow.
So I think that's another thing. If there's one project you worked on that you really loved, maybe that's a way to get in the client side as well.
A model
That's
to
helpful. Yeah,
consider.
thank you.
Oh, yeah, Emily, thank you. A model to consider if you're trying to make a difficult decision. I've got my, what is your ideal outcome, your minimum acceptable outcome, and is there a worst case scenario you're trying to avoid? It can help to set some parameters. You can also use my advanced retrospective where you write about the future as if it's already happened. Let's say
Mhm.
you're considering two different paths. Pick a future date. Maybe it's a year from now, maybe it's 5 years from now. Today is December 31st, fill in the year. It's a great day because write two different versions, one where you've taken path A, the other where you've taken path B, you're probably going to enjoy writing one of those a lot more than the other.
Yeah. It's I don't know if you saw the Steve Martin documentary, but he talked about how everybody thought he was the world's worst comedian. Like people hated him. And he literally put uh, a mark on a calendar 2 years in the future and said, if I'm not successful and people want to see me by this date, then I'm just calling it. And sure enough, he had just started to get that traction. He was writing for the Smothers Brothers and all this kind of stuff. And eventually it just took off. Yeah, Born Standing Up is a really great book. Thanks for putting that in there, Kate.
I was actually driving on a vacation trip and I was listening to the audiobook of Warren Standing Up, and it was so engrossing I did not notice the speed I was going and got pulled over. So your mileage may vary. Be careful while listening to the audiobook is really good. And of course, he narrates it himself. One
Mhm.
other thing, thinking of books, is we're getting in the home stretch. At this point, I've written 4 books. I'm in the editing phase for Calm the Chaos, which is my next book. You don't have to go and write a book. I mean, it is a painful process. It doesn't really get easier because you think of new things, like as I go, think of new things and I want to do it differently and all that. But imagine if you were to write a book, what is the book? That may help you decide where to focus.
Yeah, I
So
know what mine is.
what is your book?
Real community. It's
Mm,
like there's so many communities out there that people are trying to establish them for a purpose, an internal purpose for that individual.
yeah.
Not what community is. That's like a customer group. I don't know.
Right.
Community is a bunch of people getting together with a shared goal and shared challenges. And yeah, this is how I support my family. I am making money running this community. But if I ever felt like I was making decisions
Hmm.
so the money would come to me, I would get out of this right away. It's like I think cash is a byproduct of awesome.
Right.
So if you're creating something and offering things to people, they want you to be okay too.
Yeah.
So but yeah, it would be on real community, like what it really means, not what Best Buy is doing or whatever. No offense, Megan McInerney. Oh my goodness. I know the person in charge of all the stuff at Best
Uh,
Buy. I'm sorry.
do you want to make a public commitment for when you will publish that book? If you don't, that's okay. But if you were to pick a publishing date, what would that be? And it could even be far out in the future.
Well, as a true stoic and a believer in memento mori, I may leave this life right now, Carl. So planning things that far out. Um, it's funny, Baker's on me about it too.
Mhm.
Like really wants me to write this book. So I don't know. I'll say 5 years.
5 years. All right. I just got a copy of the
You're
Henry.
the guy who's going to come back to me and say, you got 2 weeks left. I'll be, man.
Well, I hopefully would give you a little more lead time on that. But I just got a copy of the Henry DeVries book, who runs Indie Books International, and I'm speaking at his conference in San Diego at the end of February, early March, the Agency Rainmaker Forum, and he has a book on writing books for biz dev
Nice.
to find, and I was thinking of writing that book, and then I discovered he had it. I was like, all right, well, he's already got it, so probably one to check out. So, Carl, is there anything as we're wrapping up? Is there anything that that you want to promote that people should know about?
Um, I would just say keep an eye on the social channels. We've got new levels of membership coming out. When we
Okay.
first did membership, it was right after the pandemic, and I threw together what I thought would work in one day. And we have been running off that since then. The new levels of membership actually focus more on where you are in your career or in your path. So one is at the high end, it is about M&A. It is about having more coaching and having people to help out. At the lowest level, it's about I can't afford anything, but I really want to stay plugged in with the main information.
Okay.
So it's everything from just tell me what people are talking about to help me sell. And there's two in
God.
between that. So I would say keep an eye on that. And then the events this year, it's if you go to bureauevents.com, I think it takes you right there. But I'm really excited about that. And I'm only going to 3 events this year. So
I was wondering. So you had made the commitment to your family, and then your daughter called you on it, and was like, "What is around being at home?" Have you made any further commitments like that since running the bureau? I mean, it sounds like you're going to be home more now.
yeah, I am. I don't know that my wife's like thrilled about that. We're going on 3 decades. And she's like, so you're not gonna every once a month? No. Okay. All right. Um, but
She could do her
but
own
I,
trips, you know.
but for me, I think the commitment I made was telling Lori and Meredith, who are the two other people on the team, that I trust them
Yeah.
and they can do this. And they've been doing it. I'm just a figurehead in that sense. What I want to do is stay back and work on the bureau. I still want to be in the bureau. That's what gives me the most energy.
Yeah.
But I want to work on fine tuning these events to be as valuable as they can be. I want to work on these membership levels. I want to learn just a way that I can actually support more people in the community
Right.
without it taking away from other stuff. So events generally pull me away for 2 weeks. So I feel like I'm going to get a good 2 months back that I can just focus on the community.
Nice. Nice. That's exciting, and I'm looking forward to
Right.
hearing how things go. And I'm glad to be a member of the advisory board. Kind of sharing
Ah,
advice, getting an
thank you.
early preview of things. So, for anyone who's listening, or if you're watching the video, if you've not looked into joining the Bureau, I would encourage you to. I've enjoyed various involvement for over a decade. And Carl Smith has built an amazing community. You should check it out. Carl, if people want to get in touch, where should they go?
Um, I didn't set this up, or it would be Carl at Bureau of Digital, y'all.
Oh,
It's Smith at Bureau of Digital. And look up the word bureau. I still have to. Or you just go on LinkedIn. You can find me, Carl W. Smith. And that's where I'm spouting the most. So
there we go. Carl, thank you so much.
thank you, Carl.
Well, for anyone who's joined us for agency office hours, we'll be back next month, the second Tuesday of each month. In fact, our guest, and I had not planned this, is Henry DeVries of Indie Books International, talking about writing a book to help promote your agency. So you can sign up for that now. If you have other questions you'd like to ask that I could answer or that Henry could answer, include those when you RSVP and we'll let you know if you're on the list. We sometimes have time to answer questions live, but you get first dibs if you pre-submit. So thanks so much for joining. If you're watching the video, please like or subscribe, and we'll see you next time.